Social Security has just confirmed something that millions of Americans were not expecting to hear. A permanent raise is now locked in. And before you scroll away, before you assume this is just another headline, before you think this is the same old COLA story, stop. Because what was confirmed quietly without a big press conference changes how your benefit is calculated from this point forward. This is not a one-time payment. This is not a temporary boost. This is not a stimulus check that disappears. This is a permanent adjustment locked into the system, built into your base benefit. And most people still don't realize what that actually means. Right now, millions of retirees, SSDI recipients, and SSI beneficiaries are asking the same question. How much is the new amount? And why didn't anyone explain this sooner? That question matters because once Social Security confirms a permanent change, it doesn't just affect this month. It follows you into next year and the year after that, and every COLA increase stacked on top of it. Now, here's where confusion exploded online. Some headlines claimed massive increases. Others said nothing changed at all, and a lot of people were left confused, anxious, and frustrated. But here's the truth. The raise is real. The confirmation is real. But the surprise isn't what people think it is. What happened wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, and it wasn't marketed. Instead, it came through updated calculations, revised language, and quietly finalized adjustments inside the Social Security system. And that's why most people missed it. Because when Social Security changes something permanently, they rarely use the kind of words that grab attention. They don't say breaking. They don't say raise. They change formulas. They lock numbers. They issue guidance. And only later do people realize, wait, my base amount just moved. That's exactly what's happened here. Now, you might be thinking, if this was real, why didn't I get a big announcement? And that's a fair question. But Social Security doesn't operate like social media. They don't hype, they finalize. And once something is finalized, it becomes law inside the system, whether people notice or not. This confirmation affects how benefits are calculated going forward, not just what you received last month. And that distinction is huge because a permanent raise isn't about excitement today. It's about financial stability over time. It's about whether your benefit keeps up. It's about whether future increases stack higher than before. It's about whether inflation has less power over you long term. Now, here's the part that surprises most people. The new amount didn't appear as one simple number. It didn't show up as a big, bold headline figure. Instead, it showed up where it matters most, at the foundation, the base. And once the base moves, everything built on top of it changes as well. That's why some people already see it, some don't yet, and some will only realize it once future adjustments hit. This is also why misinformation spread so fast. People expected fireworks. What they got was math. But math is exactly how permanent raises work. And in a few moments, I'm going to explain exactly what changed, why it took so long, and how Social Security defines the word permanent in a way most people misunderstand. Because once you understand that, you'll see why this confirmation matters far more than the headlines made it seem. Now, stay with me because before you get too excited or too disappointed, you need to understand what actually changed inside the system. And what happens next will surprise you. Now, let's slow this down and explain what actually changed inside Social Security because this is where most people get lost. When Social Security confirms a permanent raise, they are not talking about a bonus. They are talking about the base calculation that your benefit sits on. That base is everything. It determines not only what you receive today, but how every future increase is layered on top. For years, most beneficiaries believed raises only happened one way through the annual cost of living adjustment. Once a year, 1%, same system. But that assumption is incomplete because behind the scenes, Social Security periodically adjusts how benefits are calculated, not just how much they grow year to year. And that's exactly what happened here. This confirmation came from revised internal guidance tied to recalculated benefit thresholds and finalized formula updates that had been under review far longer than most people realized. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't sudden, it was delayed and then locked. And that delay is part of the story. Inflation surged, benefit adequacy became an issue, and pressure quietly built around whether existing calculations were still realistic for long-term beneficiaries. So instead of rolling out a flashy announcement, Social Security did what it always does. It updated the framework, small changes in wording, adjusted reference numbers, clarified definitions that hadn't been revisited in years, and once those definitions change, the system recalculates. That's where the permanent raise comes from, not from a check in the mail, from a recalculated starting point. And here's why that matters so much. When your base amount increases, every future COLA is calculated from that higher number. So even if the current change feels modest, the long-term effect is larger than most people expect. Now, let me address a big point of confusion. A lot of people assumed this was the same as a COLA increase. It's not. COLA is an adjustment applied annually to existing benefits. This change reshapes the benefit before COLA is even applied. Think of it like this. COLA raises the ladder you're standing on. This change moves the ground underneath that ladder upward. That's a permanent shift. Now, this affects beneficiaries differently. Retirees receiving Social Security based on lifetime earnings may notice the change reflected in recalculated reference amounts. Social Security disability recipients may see timing differences based on eligibility classification and review cycles. SSI recipients often see it reflected indirectly through associated thresholds and recalibrated allotments. That's why some people noticed something already and others felt nothing at all. It doesn't mean you were skipped. It means your current situation determines when the change shows up. And yes, that frustrates people because Social Security rarely explains timing clearly. But here's the truth. Once a change is locked into the base formula, also explains why Social Security avoided dramatic language. Because from their perspective, this wasn't a giveaway. It was a correction, a recalibration, something intended to support stability over decades, not hype over days. Now, here's an important reality check. This wasn't designed to instantly make anyone wealthy. If you expected hundreds of extra dollars overnight, you were sold false expectations online. But if you care about long-term purchasing power, about predictable income, about future increases stacking higher, then this confirmation absolutely matters. And here's the key point most headlines missed. Once Social Security confirms a permanent change to the base, they rarely reverse it. That's why this took time. That's why it wasn't loud. That's why they were careful. Because permanent inside Social Security doesn't mean exciting. It means durable. And now that you understand what changed and why it matters, the next question is personal. How does this affect your money, your budget, your Medicare premiums, and your future financial decisions? Because that's where the impact becomes very real. Now, let's talk about what this actually means for you, because this is where the headlines stop and real life begins. A permanent raise inside Social Security doesn't always feel dramatic at first. You don't wake up rich. You don't suddenly feel relieved overnight. But over time, this kind of change quietly reshapes your financial stability. Here's why. When your base benefit increases even slightly, that higher number becomes the starting line for everything that follows. Every future COA increase is calculated from that higher base. That means inflation has less power over you in the long run. And in today's economy, that matters more than people realize. Now, many viewers ask the same question. If this is permanent, why doesn't it feel bigger? And the answer is honest. Because Social Security is designed to move slowly. Quick jumps create instability. Gradual changes create reliability. This raise wasn't built for excitement. It was built for sustainability. But let's get specific. For retirees, this affects how much of your benefit is protected against rising costs over the next decade. For SSDI recipients, it affects how disability benefits maintain value over time, especially as COLAs continue. For SSI recipients, the impact often shows up indirectly through adjusted thresholds, linked supplements, and future recalculations. It's not flashy, but it's real. Now, there is another side to this that people need to hear. A permanent raise can also trigger secondary effects. Medicare Part B premiums are still tied to benefit changes. So, yes, for some people, higher benefits can mean slightly higher deductions. Taxes can also come into play for beneficiaries whose total income crosses certain thresholds. That doesn't mean this raise hurts you. It means planning matters, and ignoring the details is how people get surprised later. This is also where misinformation online has caused unnecessary panic. Some posts claimed people would lose benefits, others said eligibility would be threatened. That's not accurate. This confirmation does not reduce eligibility, it does not cancel benefits, and it does not remove recipients from the system. What it does is adjust how money flows over time. Now, if you're feeling disappointed because you expected something larger, that feeling is understandable. Expectation management matters, but here's the perspective many people miss. One-time checks get spent. Permanent changes compound. A small shift today becomes a noticeable difference later, especially when inflation keeps pushing prices higher. And this leads to the most important point. This raise didn't come alone. It stacks. Every future COA addition is now built on a slightly higher foundation. Over multiple years, that adds up. That's why financial planners care about base changes more than temporary boosts. Now, let me clear up one myth before we move on. This confirmation does not mean Social Security is done adjusting. It means they finished this phase. There are still ongoing discussions about benefit adequacy, inflation modeling, and long-term sustainability. Which brings us to the most important question. What happens next? What should you watch for? And how do you make sure you don't miss the signals that matter most? Because the next moves may matter even more than this confirmation. And that's where we're going right now. Now, let's bring this home because what you do after this confirmation matters just as much as the raise itself. The first thing to understand is timing. Social Security rarely implements permanent changes all at once. Instead, they roll them through recalculations, notices, and annual updates. That means some of you may see adjustments reflected in future statements or benefit letters, not immediately on your next payment. So don't panic if nothing looks different right now. Watch your Social Security notices, watch your annual benefit statements, and most importantly, pay attention to how future COA increases are applied because that's where this change becomes more visible. Another key point is awareness. A lot of people miss adjustments simply because they aren't tracking their benefits closely. They assume silence means nothing happened. That's usually not true with Social Security. Silence often means something has already been finalized, and this is why staying informed matters. Not to chase rumors, not to fall for exaggerated claims, but to understand real changes before they affect your budget. If you're planning retirement, this kind of permanent adjustment strengthens the reliability of future income. If you're already receiving benefits, it supports long-term stability rather than short-term excitement. And if you're worried you missed out, hear this clearly. You're not too late. Permanent changes don't shut doors overnight. They reshape the system going forward. Remember, this confirmation wasn't about headlines. It was about structure. It was about whether Social Security benefits continue to evolve in a way that keeps them relevant in today's economy. And while this raise won't solve every financial challenge, it moves the system in the right direction. One designed for longevity, one designed to protect beneficiaries against erosion, not just today's bills. So take this as reassurance, not alarm. You are not being left behind. You are not losing benefits, and you still have time to plan wisely. The most valuable thing you can do is stay informed, because the people who understand what's happening early always make better decisions than those who react late. If you want to stay ahead of real Social Security updates like this explained clearly, honestly, and without hype, make sure you subscribe. Stay informed, stay prepared, and remember, knowledge is one of the strongest forms of financial protection you have. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next update.